Well, welcome in. Here we go. It is the 24th day of June as we record this, and likely to be the last episode of Now and Next for a little while, but take a bit of a hiatus over the summer months and kind of recharge, reconnect, and reconvene later, and probably that some week after Labor Day. But anyway, there's plenty to talk about, and if anything really critical happens, we'll convene the group and we'll get back into your inbox. As it happens, it's the same thing with On the Ledge. So for those of you who follow the provincial podcast, then it's the same kind of thing. We signed off last week, but gave note if there's some political heat wave that hits, and that could happen, we'll be back and jump in at a moment's notice when situation requires it. All right. So if you this would be the first podcast, by the way, the official podcast of summer. And if you're watching on YouTube, you probably need an SPF 60 just based on the shirt I'm wearing. And we can kind of get into that. It is the season. All right. Around the table, let's see. The cast is here. Our comms and strategy team. Anne-Marie Aikins is here from AMA Communications. Bob Reid from Broadway Strategy, and Lindsay Broadhead is with us from Broadhead Communications. I had a whole bunch of things on the list that I wanted to talk about yesterday, but as I watched things unfold at City Hall yesterday, I thought, holy cow, last week we talked about the Premier's greatest hits on the ledge, and it was all of his rants and his ability to kind of roll things back and poke somebody in the eye and say, I'm sorry I did that, while they're still kind of blind in one eye and somehow figuring that's okay. But this week, it's Mayor Chow's greatest hits. And before we get into it, I just kind of want to go back. Yes, we have the pool situation that kind of hit, but let's go back to, the vacancy tax debacle. And the mayor blamed staff. The mayor blamed John Tory and his administration. In October, we had the no-show at the hospital for the police officer who was shot in line of duty. She had another event to attend. It was the retirement, I think, of the fire chief, so she had remarks there. A couple of days later, trouble because she doesn't attend the October 7th memorial, blames staff for a lack of an email. In February, we're talking about our snow removal. She wants a complete review of everything that went on because of the contracts that John Tory signed, and she claims that her staff told her that everything had been cleaned up. It was not the case. And then a week and a half later, people were still stumbling around on sidewalks that should have been cleared, etc. Blame staff and Tory for the contracts. This week, apparently, we did not see summer coming. So, and never mind the heat wave. I've got clips here, but just, how do we sustain this, Anne-Marie? I just don't get it. That I understand, tough job, big city, complicated, everything else, but it's the same song every 3 months.
Yeah, it is. It is very typical kind of response where she seems to have, unable to take responsibility and then take action. She just doesn't seem to have that. Doesn't seem to be an instinct for her, and that can be a killer in politics, or in any sense, any type of leadership that you're in. Any company that refuses to take responsibility and then take action, and empathize with their customers, and in her case, it's the entire city as a customer of hers, it's kind of leaving a void out there for so many people. That's why we keep hearing about names running for mayor, because they sense her vulnerability that way. I watched this press conference yesterday and I was pitying her. At one point I thought she was going to cry. Her voice got tinier and tinier and tinier.
Okay, and we're gonna roll some of that. So we'll get into that more deeply. But I think you're right. The idea that we've got this sort of recurring theme. There doesn't seem to be any learning that's going on here, Bob, from the experience.
No, No, there's none of that happening, and it was amazing as you walked us through that timeline of the history of. Oh yeah, I remember that one. Oh yeah, yeah, same old song over and over again. That's how brands get built. That's how reputations and brands are born. And this is not the kind of branding that any leader wants to have, but she's earning it herself. And I think a lot about what Doug Ford's response would be in the same situation. He'd be ranting in front of the cameras. You mentioned his rants, Dave. They're great. There would be a full on rant. He would say how pissed off he was that the pools weren't open. He would be going around to every pool and banging on the gates and raising hell and asking, why is this not open? What do we need to do to get this fixed? Damn it. And action would be taken. We don't see that here. We see the, oh, well, it's not our fault because. And this time it wasn't city staff. It's the provincial regulations that say, well, the lifeguards can't sit in the sun for hours and get overheated, which is fair and true. Absolutely. Nobody wants to see people suffering in this heat if they're fully exposed to the sun and all that. So how about we get some umbrellas in there? Like Doug Ford would have giant umbrellas in the back of his truck and drive around to every pool. But we don't see that kind of response from Olivia Chow. It's always, well, the blame for this really lies over there. And hey, I announced that all the pools would be open by the end of June, and we're not quite at the end of June yet, so we're on track with that. We don't care. This is fundamental level, municipal, street level politics. Open the damn pools. And if they're not open, you better be able to explain why and show us what you're doing to get them open. But we don't see that part. We just see the, oh, well, it's because of this and it's because of that. And the blame lies over here.
Yeah. Lindsay, if it had been a one thing, you know, and again, we're 2 years and a couple of weeks now into her mayoralty. And if it were one of those, any one of those in the 2 years, okay, I thought you kind of get a pass on one of them, maybe two of them. Mm-hmm. But there's a list here of 6 in less than a year and a half.
Right. And the list of it's not even just the what. And I think we need to talk about the what and unpack the what. But it's also her response. And that's what we're talking about too. Bob's lining her up, juxtaposition with Ford is really interesting, right? Like Ford is this highly fallible leader, but he's one of our most successful leaders because he admits fault, right? And he imbues himself in the consequences and takes ownership. That is those characteristics are very modern day leadership in that way. So when I said we have to talk about the what, it's interesting that you say every 3 months, because I wonder if there's actually some truth to that. Like Mayor Chow seems very good at doing some of the behind the scenes negotiation that is required almost of other levels of government, right? Like it feels like more of a provincial or federal behavior. The work that she and the team did to help right size some of the budgeting that Toronto desperately needs to go through, that I think was largely a success, but was very much behind the scenes, as it were. It seems the seasonality, this every 3 months trigger, has to do with the running of the city. Messy city building stuff, the stuff that you need to touch, doesn't seem to be her forte. She doesn't seem adept enough to address it. And more importantly, doesn't seem capable to mobilize the city staff teams into action in the right direction, right? And that's what a big city mayor needs to do, and that's where she keeps faltering. So there are some trends here, but we also can't ignore the communications piece about this, and that's where Bob, Anne-Marie, and I come into this, watching clips. And I don't know if that's the bridge you need, but that's where it becomes really troubling and head scratchy, because that has to do more with her immediate team and how she's being prepped where she thinks the truth is, and does she really believe all these people everywhere are always at fault and they're fireable, or is it simply that's her reflex, and that's her deferral? I don't know.
Well, there's a couple of things that kind of layer onto this as well. I mean, we've talked about the deflection is one thing. The I didn't know, seems to be a common chorus. We need to do better. Okay, and that's going to be a great bumper sticker slogan for a re-election. But the other side of this is, and you've alluded to it, is this timeline also, because when we go back to it, I look at what happened with the snow plows. She calls for a full review, and I'm using the air quotes for those of you listening on the podcast. Here was her opening remarks yesterday, just about how they were managing. Oh, it might get hot this summer.
Residents expect us to do better, and we must do better. I'm asking the city manager to review the city heat relief strategy by the last quarter of this year. I'm asking staff to determine high priority locations for surge capacity water trucks. Right now, these water trucks are in Nathan Phillips Squares and Cofer Square. There might be other areas that we need these water trucks, so let's look at it.
Just to be clear, she's talking about asking for a review of the heat strategy by the end of the fourth quarter. So it's going to have fucking snow on the ground. We're doing that.
In December, we'll have all the answers to the heat wave response. That's great. Yeah, right. Wonderful.
And wouldn't it have been thoughtful to think, okay, we've got these issues and we're planning ahead. If she'd held this news conference in December last year, Anne-Marie, and then said, and we'll be ready for whatever comes, because we know summers are getting hotter and more extreme weather. All of the things that people are saying now you didn't see coming. That should have been the December conversation last year, no?
Exactly. But I think what she did overall was, again, it was a deflection. Let's look at the policy that previous governments put in place, the hot weather strategy, rather than, which made it even worse, because then you start talking about all the issues related to heat, rather than this one specific incident in which city staff, I guess, decided to close pools on one of the hottest days we've had in years. So keep it simple to that and say, it should be able to quickly get to the bottom of what happened that day. And if they applied what they thought was the rule, in a way that had an impact on the rest of the city, then perhaps learn from that experience and talk about, let's look at other strategies that we can put in place. As Bob said, bring in umbrellas, longer breaks, more staff, things like that. Like, strategize for that specific issue and keep it to that, and then you move on.
But here's the problem. She lost complete control of this because she didn't comment on it in her opening remarks. She didn't address it at all. It was left to the media. This is a long clip, but for the purposes of those of you who are watching and listening, I want you to get the full context of this. And it's not the complete one, but it gets to Anne-Marie's point around, and I'll ask her the question, does this reflect somebody who has a handle on the file?
Mayor, you said in your statement it's obvious that pools need to be open during a heat wave. Who was that not obvious to on Sunday?
Well, it seems like that the City of Toronto health and safety protocol kicked in as mandated by the provincial government. The Ministry of Labor have an employment standard branch, and that the employment standard branch said that there needs to be safety protocol. We need to protect the lifeguards. And when the Humidex went to a certain 40 plus, then some of the pools that got too hot, perhaps because they didn't have shade structure, then the lifeguards took a longer break, which in some cases quite a few hours, and then they opened it up after. But the problem is that during the time that they were closed, that the residents are not able to go to them, right? So it's the Parks and Recreation Department needs to see that in advance. And now, a lot of those pools are opened up a week earlier, a week and a half ago. I said all the pools will be open by the end of June. We're not there yet. So there's a group of pools that are pulled forward to open now immediately because of the heat waves. And perhaps they can be better prepared.
Shouldn't your administration have been prepared?
Well, we were very prepared for it. We announced that there would be pool opening, and they were 85 of them were open. There were a few at one point, 15, and then became 5. Some were open. They were closed for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. They were technically open. They just had a closure period. They were longer because the lifeguards were feeling really hot. Now, under the health and safety protocol, they are entitled to do that. We could, if we are allowed to send paramedics to go and check, we can then reopen them. So that is working it out between the city and the provincial government, which is now happening.
Literally every day, thousands of city workers work outside. Parks people, construction people, and they work in the heat. I'm sure you've done speeches in blazing hot heat.
I have.
Yeah, and you don't say, I'm not going to do it because I'm too hot. Isn't it ridiculous that none of these people have pools to jump into? That people who literally have somewhere to cool down can't do their job in the heat.
I agree that they could have jumped into the pool and cooled down and come back out. And we could have provided some extra support. By the time we found out about it, when it was closed, we immediately swung into action, which is why the number of pools, now 85 of them were open, okay? So, and then the numbers that were closed for a few hours, then became smaller and smaller, and became 5 at the time, later afternoon.
I'm sorry for that, but I think you kind of had to feel the whole thing to get a sense of it, and it went on, and she started talking about the new lifeguards, and they're young people, and they have new jobs, and they were thrown into the job early, and it was just rambling as we went through this. A couple things. So clearly, I think it's self-evident that there was no handle on the file at all. 1, 2, 3 of you making the point about being prepared, not prepared for it at all. So that's a staff issue. But the other side of this is, and God love them, I mean, we all know many of the folks who were involved in that scrum. It's on the media side. Nobody pressed her on who made the decision to close the pool. Who was in charge? How did that happen? Didn't press her on it. There's still no answer on any of that. Cites the protocol. Okay, well, what happens when the protocol kicks in? Does Bob get to say, I'm closing this because he's the senior guy on site? What happens, right? So that didn't happen. So we still don't have any answers. I'm reading a reporting this morning from the Toronto Star where people were showing up to pools in the West End and in New York, the old city of York. Pools were closed too, with no apparent reason one way or the other. So whatever was happening at City Hall was not translating to what was going on the ground at facilities across the city. I don't know where you take that, Lindsay, but oh my God.
To be honest, I have to say I'm less concerned about the pool closures. It's the lack of foresight, right?
Agreed. Yeah, I agree. The pools aren't the issue specifically. It's a reflection of the bigger problem.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm going is right now, and I'm giving the mayor and leadership a huge bucket of leeway here with these statements. I think leaders right now, and we keep talking about leadership, and we probably will keep talking about it because it connects to communications over and over again. When you look at CEOs and organizations, there's never been a time in history when there's been so much scrutiny and pressure for leaders like that to have all the answers to all the things, and it's impossible, right? They've got to rely on a number of inputs and a number of people to get things done. But as a result, organizations are having to pivot, and they're having to pivot to focus in on the critical things, the things that they are experts in, the things that they need to drive, the things that are going to lead with on value. Over and over and over again, we're seeing this with CEOs and leaders. I'm somewhat hesitant to compare politicians to CEOs, but there is a likeness in this case. The city of Toronto has too much stuff to fix. So what do? If use the house analogy. If there's so many things in your house to fix, you can tear the whole thing down, or you just have to start thinking of what the essential things are. And why this is such a head scratcher to me is for 2 years now, almost, with this administration and following COVID largely, I think there's been great sympathy from the public that there are too many things that need to get fixed. We know this as the public. We're not dumb, right? And she came out of the gates as mayor in that space, and I think there was optimism there. But what she's doing is she's going to all the wrong places, right? I don't want her talking about, national issues of import. That's not her space. Her space right now should be low, street level, garbage, safety, like all the things that we touch and feel and experience at the city level. But instead, it's all over the place and it's diffused. And she's lost the thread on what her core function is. And as a result, the communications is reflecting that, right? What would be so powerful is if she said, I'm going to fix these 3 things. And that's where she started and why I'm so confused. And the day-to-day business of the city has to be that one of those things. And it's gotten lost. So why do the pools matter? Because they knew the weather. Because whether it's winter or summer, we know that populations are affected by temperature greatly, right? From a safety level, it's talked about all the time. So these are the things that become a head scratcher because it's not about the pools, it's about your readiness to do the basics right. And that's what we want city leaders to do right now. And I think why we're all just so perplexed.
Yeah, it becomes more, it's a sort of the cycle of frustration that builds upon itself. And I think at some level, Anne-Marie, the effect is indifference for the most part, for those people who are watching. We're all paying attention to this and we're banging the desk. But for the most part, people kind of give up on it in a hurry. And they, oddly enough, they get pissed off, but they no longer ask for accountability. They no longer expect it because, well, I'm going to expect it, but they're never going to follow through.
Yeah, and it just, when you evade the real issues and you evade taking responsibility and you evade taking action, then that sends a clear message to your constituents and your customers. As I go back to that, because they are customers, you just don't, you lack the trust. And if a leader loses trust from their basic customers, then it becomes more and more difficult to do your job. It also made me think instantly, is she hiding something? Was it what was the issue? Were there not enough staff? Are the pools not staffed enough? So was one person trying to sit in the hot sun all day and not able to take a break because they don't have backup staff? I'm guessing because in the void of real answers, we'll start to fill it in on what I think might be happening. And that's what happens if you don't give a clear answer and you don't accept responsibility. People start to fill in that space. And I think she's either somebody didn't recognize, whether in her core team or her herself that this was going to be an issue, and confront it, get the story out there first, whether it's at that press conference or well before, preferably that press conference, that somebody didn't advise her correctly on that this is going to be an issue. Seems small, that it did seem small in light of how, screwed up the city seems to be so many times. This might be small, but it's a reflection, as Lindsay said, of the larger problem of it. And she completely dropped the ball on it, and still has. I still haven't seen accountability from it. She hasn't, she's backtracked from it. Initially, she immediately blamed the province and the Ministry of Labor, and then has had to backtrack from that. Nothing worse if your leader is just backtracking the whole time.
So, Bob, the issue, though, becomes, whether or not this sticks to the mayor in any form or fashion. I recall us having this conversation over the October 7 memorial back in the fall, and it might have been you who suggested, this might be the beginning of her, the end of her opportunity for reelection, and this is going to be something that sticks to her. Considering the frequency, considering the repetitive nature of the lack of preparation, the whatever we want to call it, lack of grasp of what's actually going on and what we need in the city, does this affect any kind of consideration she might have about running for re-election?
About whether she will or not?
Well, I you got to think that the pressure is going to be on her. I suspect that, if she wanted to run as an incumbent, generally that would be a positive thing. Likely that she would win just based on incumbency. Mm-hmm. But I don't think we've seen this before in terms of, Rob Ford aside, in terms of how a mayoralty, how things have played out vis-a-vis getting the job done is the issue. Now, does that have any impact on her ability to be reelected?
Oh, for sure it does, because the litany of failures that we've been talking about have now gotten critical mass. It wasn't one of those things where, well, that could kind of happen to anybody and you can't really foresee everything that's going to happen, so we'll give a pass on this. It's a consistent pattern. And as has been noted, it's all of these incidents are reflective of the bigger problem. And you mentioned Rob Ford a minute ago. I was actually thinking about him while I was listening to the discussion. One thing about Rob Ford, that he was very good at was that street level problem solving. Potholes, right? You had bad potholes on the streets in your neighborhood. You called Rob Ford. He would show up with the pothole repair crew and get it done, because he understood that it's all well and good to point fingers at others who might hold some responsibility. But at the end of the day, you got to fix the damn problem. And you've got to be able to demonstrate that you're fixing the problem. Even if it's one pothole on one street, that's what helped build him. That's what helped propel him to the mayor's office. Was he was so effective, not only within his own ward, but neighboring wards. Residents would call. They wouldn't call their councillor. They'd call Rob Ford, because they know, yeah, he'll get the damn potholes fixed. And this is what we don't see with Olivia Chow. She says, I've called for a full review of the city's heat strategy by the end of the year. That's a big bureaucratic response to something that's far more immediate. Why aren't there umbrellas over the lifeguards at the pools? Why aren't there ways to ensure that on very hot days that the lifeguards can continue safely and comfortably to fulfill their role, so we don't have the pools closed? And even if she didn't have the answers, she should have articulated those questions. And her approach on all of these various incidents should be that. I'm really upset about this. I have a lot of questions, and I am demanding answers to these following questions. I want to know how this happened, what happened, and how do we fix it going forward, rather than, well, I've asked the city manager for a full review and we'll await the findings of that. So many of the problems that this city faces, and that she legitimately is focused on, and has done some significant work on, like affordable housing. She's secured some higher level of government funding, some other changes to try and move that forward quickly. That's great. That's important. That also takes a long time to generate any response, to get any tangible action. And what other leaders that we've been talking about recognize is you got to be able to point a camera at stuff and say, see what we're doing. Here's the action that we've taken to fix this problem. Might be a small problem. It's just a few potholes, but we're out there filling the damn potholes. And Rob Ford did that. John Tory, to his credit, was big on filling the potholes because he understood that that's the eye level, street level nature of municipal government. And the pools being randomly shut down for hours with no notice is exactly that kind of problem. And there are tangible steps that could be taken that cameras can point at and show people, here's what we've done. This was a debacle. Here's action being taken. And we're not seeing any of that.
Yeah, it's important to remember too. I mean, I love the comments around Rob Ford. I don't know if you guys watched the Netflix documentary, but it made that point, Lindsay, that's why Rob Ford was so successful. And you know, even after all the craziness that went on at City Hall, there was a whole contingent and a cohort of people who thought that's what I need my mayor to do. There's all kinds of things you don't want them to be doing. But on the other side of this, back to the one kind of issue that makes a difference, it's easy to forget that David Miller stepped down, decided not to run again because of his management of the garbage strike. So it's right where you live kind of stuff that made or break what's going on at City Hall.
Municipal politics is different, right? You go to City Hall and it's a different conversation. It's a different tenor. It's a different worker. Like the people who work for the city, there's 50,000 municipal employees in Toronto. Like, you know, and I wrote about this actually a few years ago now, but imagine the power that sits in 50,000 people, right? To mobilize them, to excite them. You're not going to get everyone. There's going to be dead weight in every organization. There is going to be immense leadership in every organization. And the potential of that, I don't mean to be Pollyanna, but it's huge, right? And you learn from the top. And I'm just struck by how, you know, what Bob and Emery, and I think I'm even getting at, is like, we're talking about communications 101 things. We're talking about leadership 101 things, right? It's to stand in front of a group of people and say, I hear you, I'm with you, let's do this together. We're going to mess up, but we're going to do it together, and we're going to have some wins along the way. That's what the city lacks. That's what this municipal political team lacks at the moment, right? You can turn it around, but there has to be that kind of wrapping arms around kind of leadership to say, I hear you. I hear that this has been a wild number of years in the workforce, but we're gonna have some wins together. So, you know, I don't even know where. There's so many places. Like that video that you played, Dave. You know, again, going to Comms 101. It's a great video for media preparation or media messaging. You know, prepare always is the first thing, right? The story of the pools was happening the morning of. It was on 10:10, blaring loud. Counselors were tweeting about it. Her team, knowing the issues around weather, should have been job number one. If she was going to do a presser, have a response ready, right? And be tight. Message two, it's okay to say you don't know, right? So Bob's taking it from the angle of, you know, take a Ford approach and say, I'm going to go get out there. I'm going to go find out. That's the Ford way of saying, I don't know, right? But I'm going to find out and I'm going to hold them to account. But it's okay to say you don't know. What's not okay is to talk for, you know, 3-4 minutes in a confusing, meandering way, because it diminishes your strength, your power, and it causes confusion and distrust, which is what's at stake right now. So third lesson, stop. Just stop talking, right? Answer the question, say you don't know if that's what all you have, and move on, right? So I'm struck by the 101 nature of all of this, and its connection to trust.
And Lindsay suggested, there's a possibility to turn this around. What do you think, Anne-Marie? Is she recoverable in the last? There's only a year and 4 months till Election Day.
Yeah, and I think it's not on this particular issue. She could still recover on this issue too if she really does the things that we're recommending. Yeah, but I think first she and her team need to learn the art of apologizing with earnestness that people believe.
But is that authentic at this stage? I mean, if all of a sudden she came out and just kind of did a 180 and
I think
who the hell are you?
I think they have to realize from this that she could have apologized, meant it, and then done something about it. And I think that one of the things that, say what you will about Doug Ford and whether or not he actually does mean his apologies, but he's getting better at apologizing. He used to be one of those people that said, I'm sorry if you were hurt. Or if you were, it was like this. It was always a qualifying apologies. He's getting better at that. He's learning to freaking apologize. And Olivia Chow has a real tough time with that. It is an art to learn. And that's a skill that we all have to learn about apologizing and really meaning it. And then taking action. So she has to learn from this experience, but I think she can fix this one. And it isn't necessarily calling us into 1010 and saying, I want to say I'm sorry now and I'm going to take ownership for it. No, it's about taking the action. She kind of blew the opportunity for an apology. Now take some action and announce it. Get ahead of it and say, we figured out what happened in here and we have a plan with umbrellas, extra staff, extra water, the breaks, staggering breaks. It's an important health and safety kind of thing to be planning for to protect your staff in the front, and better perhaps decision making at the top of whatever happened to make that decision to think there's this law and I have to apply it this way because they're hot. And I think she can recover from that as well. But it takes some real, I think they have to go back to basics, both her team and herself, about the just as Lindsay pointed out, how you manage issues through communications. It's a skill to learn, and it's not too late for them, but they better get the hell on it because time is running out, and people are sensing her vulnerability as an incumbent. If she intends to run, there's going to be all kinds of people that are, and if the right gets united, that can bounce her off her perch very easily. So I think she really needs to take this seriously because these things are going to still happen if she doesn't, because that shit happens in a big city all the time, and then you have to have that skill, and she needs some time to do that.
I'm not sure I share Anne-Marie's optimism on that, Bob. I mean, there's been ample opportunity to say there was a lesson to be learned here. And we've cited the 6 or 7 incidents in a very short period of time. And you can fill in, swimming pools, plows, memorials, whatever the issue of the day is, but the overarching chorus is the same thing. So I'm not sure that any learning has been going on. I don't have any confidence that they could turn that around effectively. Maybe they don't whether they don't know how or they don't want to, period. I don't know. They must think they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, I have the same questions because, it's all patently obvious to the four of us, but just seems to be lost on her and her team. So can she turn it around? She does have some runway. She's got a year and a bit, but it's got to stop. And the next time something blows up, and something will, there has to be evidence of a change in approach on all the points that we've already summarized here. But there has to be a very clear change in direction starting now. She or her chief of staff or all of them need to get it into their heads. This stops now. We can't afford any more of these. We've got to change our approach, change our response, be nimble, be empathetic, be understanding, be pissed off, and be seen to be doing. And if we get a year of that, then these things can go into the background and there can be some shift in focus. Again, I'm not saying that that's easy or that it's even maybe achievable, but that's the only way, that's the only path forward for her is to make a significant change like that.
Well, and Bob gave her some grace in terms of it being a year, Lindsay. Let's face it, the election campaign will start on January the 2nd.
Yeah.
I think for some it started, right? Like,
Oh, for sure.
if you follow some, which I know we all do, but people are out and mobilizing and throwing, teasing if their hat's going to go in the ring or not, which is going to be fascinating. Mayor Chow has the advantage of incredible name recognition. You mentioned the incumbency, and also I think in a world that's politically divided as we are, she has that NDP base that is probably quite loyal. So I'm not sure. I'd love to know the breakdown. And I guess the fourth thing also is that because we're a city, unfortunately, that doesn't vote en masse, you can win with margins, right? Small margins. So the win is very optimistic, right? So it'll be interesting to see how subjects like this become fodder for campaigns, and what's sticky with the public moving forward, depending on who's in the race.
Yeah, I can already imagine the Anne Marie that Brad Bradford's in at home in his office doing shot listing all of the incidents from the videos, so he can put his campaign together. And I'm being facetious in that, but that's the kind of scrutiny that this campaign or this administration is going to come under, not just now, but as soon as it becomes legal for them to declare and sign on the dotted line, the nomination papers, all sorts of things. This is probably going to be, if she runs again, one of the more intense elections that we would have with an incumbent in the chair.
Yeah, and often incumbents get booted. Often they win because they have all those advantages that Lindsay spoke about. But often we need either you have a change election, which I'm not sure we're there in Toronto yet, but we could very well be. But also, if you have constant screw-ups along the way, and there's going to be another bad thing that happens in this city. Guaranteed, things happen, and how you handle each of those things people will remember. I know of at least 2 situations, and yesterday's was one of them. Those clips are going to be used in media training on what not to do, on how not to behave when bad things happen, and that's as a leader, that's the last thing you want, is to be an example of what not to do. And that's the reality of it. She's going to have to, and her team, really come to Jesus moment and figure out the bad things are going to keep happening because that's where a big city and shit happens. And at 60,000 people screw up on a daily basis. And some of those make the airwaves, and we complain about it. We're outraged about it. And they may, again, we've said this, may seem small in the context of all of the terrible problems that we're all facing. But I think how you manage this city and how you manage the bad things that happen is really, really important. And I don't know, do they have a come to Jesus moment? That's going to be totally up to them.
It's sort of a subtle version of that, though, yesterday, Bob, when the premier was being pressed on it. I think it was on the Jerry Agar show on News Talk 1010. And, Jerry was on fire, which is understandable in terms of how he presents and his approach to the mayor, and she was lying and all that kind of thing. The premier was very careful in terms of his language around his relationship with the mayor, for the most part, saying, whatever's going on, we'll let her deal with it, but I'm not going to, kind of drive the bus over her based on that. I thought it was an interesting, again, tone and approach to it. On the one hand, he could have been accused of leaving her out to hang to dry without saying anything. But on the other hand, kind of give her some space because we're working well together.
He values that relationship as he values his relationship with Mark Carney in the Prime Minister's office. And they're useful relationships for Doug Ford. And I think he gets that. I think he has witnessed firsthand the popularity of the levels of government working together positively and cooperatively. So I don't know that he was saving her bacon necessarily, but I think he was determined not to be the guy to put his foot on her throat when she's down, because the gains are bigger on the other side of that equation by being supportive, by saying, yeah, we'll let them deal with those issues, but we're going to continue to work, cooperatively and supportively. There's much greater political capital in that. And I think Doug Ford's realized that.
All right. Well, let's leave it there, shall we? And we'll take a bit of a break. We'll come back and see. We'll over and under on how many times we're going to get some kind of a fuck up between now and, say, Labor Day. I'm just saying. All the betting platforms got that listed there. But Bob Reid is here. Anne-Marie Aikins, Lindsay Broadhead. Thanks to all of you and for your regular contribution to the program. It's great to have you guys. So thank you. Enjoy your summer, by the way.
You too.
Yeah, you guys too.
Yeah, I'm dressed and ready for it. Here we go. All right, this is it. It's Now and Next. And if you are subscribing to us, you haven't subscribed to us on the YouTube channel, do that, because you get this show. And as I've mentioned, On the Ledge. And I've got a few things that I'm going to roll into this feed through the summer, including some of the crazy, awesome shows that we've been producing at Story Studio Network. We've got about 4 or 5 enterprise series that we're either finishing or have just completed and are out there in the world. So I'm going to drop them into this feed and give you some context around it. But considering everything that's going on with the climate, the environment, the wildfires, really interesting program we're doing with the folks at the IWK Foundation in Halifax. And they're attached to the maternal and pediatric care unit, large healthcare center in Nova Scotia. And it would be the largest, I think, east of Montreal. A really fascinating piece we did on women's health and the bias that is baked into how we treat women's health, the treatments, the prescriptions, the medications, everything. There's this incredible bias where almost everything is tested on men, not women. What? Yeah. Anyway, it's really an interesting piece. So that will be among the shows that we'll feature in this feed through the summer break. Thanks for being here. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, and make sure you also hit follow or subscribe if you're listening on Apple, iHeart, Spotify, wherever you might be. I'm Dave Trafford. This is Now and Next for Story Studio Network.